Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arlith. The UK and its European partners have confirmed that Alexei Navalny was poisoned with epibetadine, a lethal toxin, during his imprisonment in Russia, holding Russia responsible for violating the Chemical Weapons Convention. And the announcement was made at the Munich Security Conference and highlights Russia's ongoing pattern of using chemical weapons, including in Salisbury and Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has banned Telegram and WhatsApp in another blow to civil liberties in the country. Now, joining me to discuss this and more is Ivana Stradner, Research Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Hello, Ivana, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, now let's start with the findings that Alexei Navalny was poisoned while in prison with epibetadine, a substance found in the skin of Ecuadorian dart frogs. Now, the UK is reporting the poisoning to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons as a flagrant violation by Russia of the Chemical Weapons Convention. Now, the big question, what, if any, consequences shall Russia face as a result of this complaint?
First and foremost, I have to admit that I was not surprised by reading this news because this is a typical old KGB strategy that the Soviet Union was even employing against the enemies of the Kremlin. And as soon as Putin came to power, he also resorted to similar efforts by poisoning multiple people that he considered as enemies of Russia. So that's not surprised. And Russia did this for two particular reasons. Number one, to send a clear message to any opposition inside Russia what are going to be consequences. And the second thing is for Putin to send a message to the West that Russia will not bear any consequences for this. So I have to tell you, by exposing this is a step in the right direction, but we already knew what happened several years ago with Navalny and poisoning. So this is really nothing new. What I want to see is concrete measures, such as more sanctions and more understanding Russia is not willing and that Putin is not willing to stop this war. So which means that instead of delivering, we are gravely concerned statements, we need to send all the weapons that Ukraine needs to put Russia on the defensive. And that is going to be more powerful than any statement on social media that foreign leaders have been putting since earlier this morning. But again, this really tells us all we need to know, who we are dealing with when it comes to negotiation on ending this war in Ukraine. Putin is a former KGB guy, but I want to remind your audience that Putin was a second-rate KGB guy. So even though that he loves to put such brutal efforts against the opponent to show once again that he is a pure dictator, an evil dictator, we also do not have to put him on a pedestal because he is not that strong and Russia is not winning the war. So that's precisely why it's right now the right time to negotiate with Putin with the language that he understands, which is the language of power.
Right, and hopefully Europe is going to realize that more and more, and as they are taking on the sole burden of supporting Ukraine, hopefully, hopefully they will create a common policy over that matter. I'm concerned actually about that, though, because if Europeans want a seat at the table, I think we'll switch subjects for just a minute. If the Europeans want a seat at the table in the negotiation process, I'm questioning as to whether there's consensus as to the strategic outcomes that they're seeking. What do you think about that?
I'm so glad that you asked this question because the real question here is, what is the strategy for Ukraine when it comes to the EU, but also the US? Europe is thinking tactically and operationally. They are not thinking strategically. And Putin when it comes to this war, he's thinking significantly more strategically than Europe. And that's precisely why, providing the weapons and sanctions, it's a step in the right direction, but we also need to understand what is the final goal for Europe. And that's why we have to zoom out and to understand what is Putin's ultimate objective. His ultimate objective is to show that the West is a paper tiger. Make no mistake, he is going to eventually challenge NATO through his hybrid warfare activities, and he has already been doing it, including where you're sitting right now in Poland. And the third pillar is what Russia and China have been doing to create an axis of aggressors and try to create a multipolar world. So the war in Ukraine, it's not only about Ukraine, it is truly about the changing the global order. And that's why we need strong Europe speaking in one voice more than ever before in the history after the World War II. So I absolutely agree with you that it's past time really for European leaders not to think only tactically, operationally, but they have to think strategically. And my concern, I have to admit, is that in politics, risk aversion is rewarded. And the EU bureaucrats who are sitting in Brussels, they care sometimes much more about their pension and their benefits and being re-elected than they care about European security writ large. So that's something that I worry about. But seeing, countries such as Poland and the Baltic states and several other nations who really understand how Russia is operating, that gives me more hope.
Yes, okay, here's $1 million question now. What does Europe need to do to fix this problem? Do you think that it should, in some way, integrate foreign and defense policy, either within or without the auspices of the European Union, to be able to project any resolve or to have a common policy when it comes to defense and deterrence and where it will take action, what have you? How do you think the Europeans should do that?
I would love to see not only within the context of the EU per se, but also within the context of NATO, which worries me equally, because even within NATO, we are not talking in one voice. You have countries such as Hungary or Slovakia with Fico that are very much, sometimes peddling Kremlin's points. And Putin knows this thing. And that's precisely why Russia has been trying to divide NATO and the European Union. When it comes to the EU, we also have to understand that putting more sanctions, but sanctions that actually work, might deliver certain efforts. And we also have to understand that countries on a bilateral level with Ukraine should also be something when it comes to weapons delivery important. So that's something that I'm hoping for to see. And finally, my last point is, without the United States and support the United States, we will not be able to see peace in Ukraine anytime soon. And that's precisely why we need more unity between Washington and Brussels.
Okay, well, I want to return to our original discussion and topic. And my next question for you was about Navalny's death. And, how should this, why should we even care about this? Navalny went on his own free will after being poisoned once back to Russia, somehow miraculously expecting a different outcome. And then we've also seen so many people falling out of windows and heart attacks in the past 4 years. That it's so difficult to keep track. So really, should we be surprised in the West that Vladimir Putin behaves like this in his own country?
So nobody should be surprised. And you're absolutely right. There are so many cases that we are also desensitized even to notice sometimes that on cover pages, because if something like that, happened during the Cold War, and by the way, things were happening during the Cold War, but nowadays things are really also on a different level. So why should we care? Look, the EU and also the United States, we are not the Red Cross, just helping out of pure empathy. I think we should care also because this is the question of national security. If we are talking about the reshaping of the global order, I think it's extremely important to emphasize why we need to protect democracy and to protect democracy globally. I'm not saying, that peddling democracy inside Russia, that things are going to change there. Unfortunately, I don't see any serious change inside Russia anytime soon, even with the opposition if miraculously win at some point in the near future. But what I'm saying, if we are going to allow Putin to continue with his war in Ukraine, that will just signal a very clear signal to all other authoritarian leaders that they can pursue whatever they want to do, and there should be serious consequences. And the best consequence right now that Putin can face is to understand that Putin is not willing to negotiate in good faith. And Putin doesn't plan to end this war anytime soon. He just needs to buy more time to reposition his military and to continue. And that's a message that both the United States and the EU should hear clear and loud. What does it mean? It means that the United States and Europe should be ready and willing to provide Ukraine with all the weapons that Ukraine needs to put Russia on the defensive if Putin is not willing to stop this war basically yesterday. And he will not stop this war anytime soon. So we have to be ready for that. And my last point is, look, New START agreement just stopped. Everyone is worrying now about the new arms race. Look, for Russia, nuclear weapons are a psychological weapon. We all fear, in the West, escalation. But escalation is the part of Putin's deterrence, which is the part of psychological game. And as I mentioned, Putin only understands the language of power. And for Putin to stop where he is right now, we have to act fast when it comes to weapons delivery. And my last point is, Putin is waging a new generation of warfare, which means that Putin doesn't need to send tanks and jets to any of the Baltic states or Poland or any other Western capital in Europe. All he has to do is to continue with his hybrid warfare activities, which is powerful enough to basically divide NATO and to accomplish his military objectives. So that's another thing where you have to understand the nature of Putin's war. Nowadays, everyone is talking about hybrid war, thinking, that this is some random propaganda, random sabotage activities. No, this is a type of war, and Putin is already at war with the West.
Yes, and finally, we're just about out of time, but I'd like to get your response on this ban of Telegram and WhatsApp, and probably there's going to be more such applications or programs or access to information that will be banned in Russia. What is the ultimate goal of this? Is Russia seeking to cut its citizens off from the global information sphere?
Oh, Putin has been trying to do for more than a decade. I mean, just with the full-scale invasion, he banned multiple apps. But the first effort was much earlier than early 2022. The ultimate goal is, of course, a total control of the information environment within Russia, and to suggest a Russia-controlled app, Max, and to basically put forward the whole internet sovereignty. So it's a typical, KGB strategy, old KGB strategy. The Russians are not happy about that, which is a good news. And already military is complaining about potential ban, basically about a ban of Telegram and what's happening with WhatsApp. So Putin is really playing with fire. But let him make, mistakes that will benefit us.
Yes, well, he's done a miracle for his soldiers along the front lines with that and Starlink, so let's hope that that continues. Ivana Stradner, a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, I very much enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for a kind invitation.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.